This is Instructor Paul, and in this lecture, we're going to configure our WSUS clients with group policy. The first thing we're going to do is kind of move our server around within Active Directory. We're going to create an organizational unit, put it in the right OU, and then we'll be creating a GPO that will be applied to all of our SUS clients so they'll know where to pull their updates from. So I'm logged into my ITFDC01 server right now, and what I'm going to do on this server is go to Tools, under Server Manager, and I'm going to select Active Directory, Users, and Computers. Once that loads, I'm going to expand my domain itfleet.com, and I'm going to expand the itfleet organizational unit. Now, under the computers container, I have my ITFWSUS01 server, and I'm going to make a new organizational unit called Servers under itfleet, and I'm going to place this server under that organizational unit. So I'm going to right click on itfleet, and I'll say New and Organizational Unit. And I'm just going to call this Servers. And I'll click OK. And now I'll go back to the computers container, and I'm going to drag ITFWSUS01 into that OU. And I'm going to check this checkbox so I don't get this message anymore. I'll click Yes. And now we can see that server is now inside of that OU. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to create a GPO that's going to apply to all of our workstations and tell them where to pull their updates from. So I'm going to exit out of Active Directory, and under Server Manager, my ITFDC01 server, I'm going to select Tools, and I'm going to go to Group Policy Management down here in the middle. And I'll expand the Group Policy Editor. And under itfleet.com, I'm just going to right click and I'm going to say create a GPO in this domain and link it here. And we'll call this WSUS Client Configuration. And we'll click OK. So we're linking it to the root of our domain. So this will apply to all the computers inside of our domain. So I'm going to right click on this GPO and I'm going to choose Edit. Okay, so now I'm going to maximize this screen here. And I'll expand this left pane out a little bit so we can see what we're doing here. So under Computer Configuration, I'm going to go to Policies, Administrative Templates, Windows Components, and we'll scroll down to the bottom and find Windows Update. So here it is. I'm going to click on Windows Update, and there's a couple settings that we need to configure here. First, we need to say Configure Automatic Updates. We need to right click on this and choose Edit. Okay, so now we're going to click Enabled and enable this feature. And then we have the first setting, which is Configure Automatic Updating. And we can choose from various options here. Now, I'm going to choose number 4. And the reason for that is because I don't want my clients to decide when they want to install updates. Also, every IT environment that I've ever worked in, they've always chosen number 4. And the reason for that is because people generally tend not to install automatic updates because it's just a pain and it slows down their computers, and sometimes it requires a reboot. So when Microsoft releases an update, a lot of times they're fixing vulnerabilities that prevent hackers from hacking into your systems or your networks. So you don't want people to decide that they don't want to update their system. So I just choose auto download and schedule the install. Now we could choose to install this during automatic maintenance, but we haven't configured any automatic maintenance, and we could find more information about that in this right pane here, but that's not anything that we're going to cover in this lecture. Now, I'm going to choose every Saturday, and I'm going to choose a time that's late on Saturday. So let's say 8 p.m. every Saturday, I want it to start installing updates. That way, by the time Monday rolls around, the update should be done, and it shouldn't inconvenience anybody. Maybe the computer will reboot while they're out, but that's to be expected. So under install updates for other Microsoft products, if there were updates on the server for Office or Excel, we could choose to install those applications or install those updates rather. But I don't have any of those applications in my environment, so that's not necessary, and I'm just going to click OK. Next, we're going to say specify intranet Microsoft update service location. So we'll right click and choose edit, and this is where we actually point our SUS clients to the WSUS server. So I'm going to click enabled, and then we're going to type in the address of the server as a website. So HTTP, and we're not going to use HTTPS, but we're going to do HTTP : and then the name of our server, which in my case is ITFWSUS01. Now we also need to include the port, which if you remember from the setup is 8530. Now this is going to be the exact same value for the statistics server. So the Windows Server Update server and the statistics server is going to be the same address. Our WSUS server will handle both of these. Okay, so now we're going to select OK. And we're going to choose automatic update detection frequency. And by default, this is every 22 hours. But since I'm in a lab environment, I'm going to change this to every 1 hour. So this is because obviously, like I said, I'm in a lab environment. If you're in a big production or corporate network, then I wouldn't recommend setting it to every 1 hour, as that will slow down your network kind of unnecessarily. So it's better just to go with the default options if you're in production. But since I'm trying to speed things up a little bit, I'm going to choose the interval to 1 hour. So I'll click OK. And that is going to be the last setting that we're going to have to configure. We could do all these other ones if we'd like, but I don't have any need to configure any of these other settings. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this group policy management editor. And I'm going to again close group policy management. So now that I'm on my domain controller, I'm going to go ahead and hit the start button, and I'm going to type in CMD, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say run as administrator. Okay, now I'm going to run the GP update command that we've run so many times. So I'm going to type in GP update / force. And we're going to wait for this to finish. Now, this might take a second, but it shouldn't take very long. The settings we configured, just don't require that much processing time. And I can see here that it's already completed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to force our server to check in right now. And we can do that by hitting the start button and typing WUAU-CLT. And that is the Windows Update command. And this is a Windows Update utility that we're going to pass / detect now. Oops, if I can type that right. There we go. So WUAU-CLT / detect now. And there's a space in between WUAU-CLT and detect now. And I'll press enter. And it's not going to really do anything. The command executes so fast that you can't even hardly see it. And I'm going to, again, type in WUAU-CLT / and then we're going to say report now. And then we're going to run this command. Okay, so one last thing we're going to do is hit the start button. We're going to go to settings. We're going to scroll down and choose update and security. And we can see here that it says it is checking for updates. So now we're going to go over to our Windows Server Update Services server and see if the client has checked into the console or if it's listed on the console. So go ahead and switch over to your WSUS server and then come back and resume this lecture once you've reached that point. Okay, so I'm logged into my ITFWS01 server. So what I'm going to do is select Tools, and we're going to choose Windows Server Update Services. Okay, now I'm going to expand my server here, and I'm going to expand computers, all computers, and I'm going to select unassigned computers. And we can see here that the ITFDC01 server is now being listed. So this took a couple minutes for the computer to populate in my WSUS server. It didn't show up right away. So if yours isn't listed here immediately, don't worry, just give it some time and you'll see that it'll populate over time. Another thing that I wanted to point out really quick is under the server manager, if we click on local server and then we choose Windows Firewall, if we go under allow an app or feature through the Windows Firewall, we'll see that by default, the Windows Update or WSUS ports, if we click on details, we can see exactly what it is, 8530, and I think it is 8531. They have been allowed by default. So if you have an external firewall or anything that your clients have to go through first, make sure that you open these ports so that they can check in with the server. Okay, so that is how you get your clients configured with group policy, and that is how you get them to check in quicker than they would by default. So I'm just going to let my other servers and workstations in the domain check in automatically. That will happen over the process of the next 24 or 48 hours. So good job getting through this lecture, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.